I had a panic attack, and that spiraled me into depression and anxiety. And from there, my life just kind of spiraled. And I was depersonalized. I felt like my life wasn't really my own life. I could even look at my birthday. I would look in the mirror and I would think, is that really me? Is that really what I look like? And probably the most bizarre scenarios were a couple I tell people. When I was in college, I played football a ton. And when I went back for a game, I felt like I had never been there before. I felt like it was my first time being there.
That is so scary.
The advice that I'm given is to just not give up hope. You know, there's always something out there, even if you don't find the results that you want with upper cervical chiropractic care, that there's always hope out there. And to continue to expect that there's something coming. And there's so much to be said about just having hope and continuing the journey of discovery. And you never know where that path is going to take.
Welcome, everyone, to a new episode of the Expect Miracles podcast. Today's episode is sponsored by uccnearme.com. Find an upper cervical chiropractor near you on uccnearme.com. Today, we have a very special guest, Dr. Al Cobb out of the Blair Clinic in Lubbock, Texas. He's a phenomenal upper cervical doctor. He's got a great story on how he got into this. And without further ado, please welcome Dr. Al Cobb. Dr. Al, how are you today?
Hey, Kevin, thanks so much for having me on. Yeah, I'm doing great. It's a great day in Lubbock. The wind isn't blowing too much, so that's always a win when you start the day off like that here.
Absolutely. Is you feeling that Texas sun down there, the summer heat hitting hard or not?
Oh, yeah.
Yet? Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's definitely hot. It feels like when you go outside, it feels like you're either in your dryer, or it feels like somebody's got a blow dryer blowing straight on you when you roll the windows down. So,
gotcha. So Al, I always like to ask people, where are you from originally? What were you into growing up as a kid?
Yeah, I grew up in small town Tennessee, about an hour south of Nashville. On the border of Alabama. One of my buddies jokes with me, says I'm pretty much in Alabama, and that's pretty much an insult where I'm from. So, but yeah, I grew up on the border of Alabama, about an hour south of Nashville, in a small town called Pulaski. I was really involved with sports. I'm the youngest of 5.
Wow!
And so I played pretty much everything. I played football, basketball, baseball, soccer, pretty much anything that we had access to. It was just a form of babysitting for my parents. But I grew up pretty athletic and had a chance to really hone in on football. And yeah, I got a chance to play football at the Virginia Military Institute in Lexington, Virginia, and had a great time doing that. I played there for 3 years. I started there for 3 years. I was there for my whole 4-year career, but decided to leave school and forego my 5th year of eligibility and go into ministry, actually. So I moved to Knoxville, Tennessee, and this is where I say go Vols. And I was on staff for the Fellowship of Christian Athletes there. So sports has been pretty much my entire life, but that's kind of where my health journey kicked off there. But yeah, I grew up in Middle Tennessee, moved to Knoxville, Tennessee after college. And so I've pretty much been in the Southeast my whole entire life until I moved out here to Lubbock.
So it's interesting. It sounds like you had another calling before you got into chiropractic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So what happened with that? What was that like? And how did you transfer over into chiropractic?
Yeah, Kevin, I thought that I would be in ministry my entire life. Joke on me is I still am. My wife works for a college ministry here in Lubbock. And so I'm still putting in 10 to 20 hours of ministry work, probably per week on busy weeks, and other weeks it's just several hours on a Sunday night. But yeah, I thought I would be in ministry my whole life. I felt a strong calling to it. And when I was about a year into ministry, I was kicking the soccer ball around with a friend there, and she played D1 soccer, so she had quite a leg on her. So she crossed one across a pitch, and I tried to head one in, just having fun. And I think I hit straight on top of my head. I don't remember playing soccer too much anyways, so I don't remember the mechanics that well. But I instantly saw stars, got dizzy, fell on the ground. I was like, give me a second. And then in true athletic fashion, I was like, I'm fine. Yeah, I'll be all right. But the interesting thing is within probably several days, I can't remember, maybe a week, I had a panic attack, and I had never had any type of mental illness or any type of struggle with my mental health before. I'd always been healthy and happy and very laid back, kind of the way I am now. But I was, within a week, I had a panic attack, and that spiraled me into depression and anxiety. And from there, my life just kind of spiraled. And I was depersonalized. I felt like my life wasn't really my own life. And I felt like I could even look at my birthday and I would have to look at it, or I would look in the mirror and I would think, is that really me? Is that really what I look like? And probably the most bizarre scenarios were a couple that I tell people. When I was in college, I played football a ton. And when I went back for a game, I felt like I had never been there before. I felt like it was my first time being there.
That is so scary.
Yeah, it's bizarre. And then I tell people as well that when I would go home and be with my family, I felt like I know these are my family members, but it feels like somebody else's family, or I'm outside of it. It was like I was watching my world in third person. It was really bizarre.
Like playing a character in your own movie.
Yeah,
I had the same
GTA 5.
Dude, I had the same symptoms with my concussion, and there's a lot of symptoms that go with post-concussion syndrome, and I think depersonalization is one of the worst.
Absolutely, because you feel like you're just going crazy, and it's kind of the way that most mental illness diagnoses are. Nobody really understands it, so they just think you're kind of making it up, or it's just all in your head, which now come to find out it's a brain-based pathology or situation that you find yourself in, and there's not many things that can get you out of it except for kind of reconnecting yourself back to the body, which is kind of one of the things that I found. So I was trying to be as healthy as I could, eat all the different diets, try those things out, eat healthier, and work out more often. And eventually I was working out so much that I kind of threw my back out. And thankfully there's a chiropractor in town that was kind of associated with some of the ministry work we were doing. And he was very philosophically based, very subluxation based. And so he had a classic new patient orientation class that I went to. And I had been trying to listen to all the podcasts, read all the books that I could at the time. And of course, this was 2019, there wasn't that much out there. Not much
information.
Exactly.
Still isn't.
It was only 6 years ago. Yeah. So he started talking about how the brain is intricately connected to the body, and how our bodies are intrinsically designed to heal and recover by themselves as long as we take the stress out of the nervous system. And I sat there and just thought to myself, this is literally everything that I've been learning. And it put it all together for me. It took all these different pieces with the health, with the gut, with the brain, with just exercise, all those things that I was trying to do. And it put them all together in one simple idea for me, that the body is created intelligently to heal. And all we've got to do is take the pressure off of the nervous system and allow it to heal naturally in a state of less stress. And I took that and ran with it. I got into chiropractic care. It was a TRT office. It wasn't an upper cervical clinic, but man, I think that was one of the most impactful things that I did, because everything else started working even better. I was more in tune to my body. I started to take exponential leaps in my counseling. I felt like I was able to process things better and exercise better and exercise longer and more efficiently. And so, yeah, that was the main thing. And eventually I said, hey man, can I just shadow you? Because I think my time in ministry is kind of moving to an end. And for me, I started to see that I couldn't pour out in the way that I wanted to, because I was still really I could barely see a foot ahead of me, Right. And so I couldn't really help people where I was.
Can't pour from an empty glass.
That's exactly it. And so as much as I was trying to do, I couldn't do it anymore. And so I stepped away from it. And eventually, within 3 to 4 months, I was packing my bags for chiropractic school, because I'd spent so much time in that office and seen so many miracles, and just wanted to play a part in it. And I think that it's really interesting for me because now I get to help people that are in the same exact spot as me. And so my passion over time became I get to help people, or my passion became that I want to help people live the life they were called to live and express that life that they're meant to express. And in the same way that I wasn't. Who knows? I think my own perspective is that God will move your path in a way that benefits his ultimate plan, regardless of what our desires are.
Of course.
And so it was interesting to see that happen in my own life. But if I can help people get out of pain so that they can live the life that they're called to live and supposed to live to benefit their communities, that's kind of my own passion now.
That's amazing, Al. I had no idea that was. I've seen a couple videos where you've touched on it, but what an amazing, profound story. And that's one of my favorite things is interviewing people that are doing what they love every day, and that's truly amazing. And there's so many people that are suffering with the same symptoms you had, I had after our concussions, and you are now doing the diplomate program in upper cervical, correct?
Yeah.
Which is what really hones in on the neurology, the ligaments, gives you a really great understanding of the craniocervical junction. Why is it when somebody has a concussion like you did, they have that depersonalization symptoms? I have so many people come in with panic attacks and anxiety that they've never had that before. What do you think is going on in the upper cervical spine that's causing a lot of these symptoms to present themselves after a concussion?
Gosh, man, where do I even start? So I started to really dive into this whenever I moved to Lubbock a couple years ago. I was already researching it on my own and talking with some of the upper cervical docs that I knew, like Cameron Bearder, John Stenberg, and Dr. John Chung. So those guys really started to make me think a little bit differently about concussions in general. And so I dove a little bit deeper and got some education with the Complete Concussion Management Institute. It's Dr. Cameron Marshall. Man, he really put it all very simply for me. But I was already starting to kind of put these pieces together. So a concussion is not like a brain bruise or that the brain just hits up against the skull. It's interesting for me because I started to realize I get to take these anatomical changes and I experienced these. So I'm looking at these through a different lens, not a clinical lens, but an experiential lens. And so every time you have any type of concussion, it's usually created from a force of about 70 to 120 Gs just in an instant. And it doesn't have to be to the head. It can be to the body that jolts some type of force into the brain. But what's interesting, though, is it only takes about 4 or 5 Gs of force to cause some type of injury in the neck. And we know that every concussion has some whiplash. Every concussion has some type of whiplash-like mechanism to it. So every concussion inherently will likely come with some type of whiplash injury to the neck as well. So it's going to cause dysfunction in the way that the brain perceives the neck, and that's what we call proprioception, but also the way that it moves. And when those things start to compound on each other, we know that the neck can get caught into some weird positions and it'll get stuck there, fixated there. And I think that causes problems not only locally, but globally, because then the fluid can effectively move into and out of the brain in the way that it should. And it's not like it's direct pressure onto the spinal cord or onto the brain stem, but we see that there's problems in the way that these things are processing. So our brain is not inherently perceiving the world or our environment or our body itself in the way that it should be. So there's always this mismatch in communication and perception. And I think that inherently is what goes on when we think about depersonalization. Our brain does not know what's going on with the rest of the body, and we detach. And the other interesting thing is when we think about what we call the subtypes, the cervical spine is just one subtype. The mental health is another subtype as well. You could even break it down into inflammation and gut. And we know that within 2 to 4 hours of a head injury, the gut completely expands. And it does that because it's inherently designed to help the body heal. It wants to help release some of these toxins so that it can detoxify the entire system. But we know that within 2 to 4 hours, we have leaky gut, and leaky gut has time and time again been shown to have some type of mental health component as well, because 70 to 90% of the important neurotransmitters in the brain that are important for mental health, dopamine and serotonin, are made in the gut. So when there's dysfunction in the gut and inflammation in the gut, that 70 to 90% just does not get made as effectively. So, gosh, I could talk for hours about concussion, because not only did I live it, but I start to see these just compounding effects. We also take into account how the rest of the body is perceiving the brain. And then we have this perfect storm of chiropractic being one of the biggest movers when it comes to cervical spine care, especially upper cervical chiropractic care, cervical spine care, brain rehab, and full body control rehab. I guess that's not the best way to say it. Full body control recovery, so that we can so that we can correctly perceive not only our own body, but the environment that we're operating and functioning in.
Very cool, Al. And so I'd imagine in your clinic, one of the first steps, obviously, to get the ball rolling in a healing direction is to do the neurological tests, the CBCT, 3D X-ray, and give that person their first upper cervical correction.
Oh,
and that by itself can be so impactful in the healing process with concussions. Now, it's not the only component. So some people will do really well and they'll kind of plateau. Is there anything else that you like to introduce with the upper cervical correction to help people really come 100% full circle in healing concussions?
Sure. Yeah. And you said it perfectly. I think that, gosh, biggest thing we can contribute is the thing that we're specialists in, and the things that we've taken hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours to perfect our craft in and be experts in, and that's the upper cervical correction. And the interesting thing too is that most people don't come to us and originally they've already been to physical therapy, they've been to the neurologist, they've been to maybe a neuro rehab specialist, and so they've already been looking at these things. And so what's interesting to me is I don't have to do too much rehab on the back end of it. You know, if you correct the spine and allow these things to kind of just slowly get better over time, people will. Now, some things that I do always check, especially when there's concussions, I check the autonomic nervous system, and we just do that by blood pressure in different positions. And we do that with heart rate monitor or a pulse oximeter on the finger, just in different positions. But I also tie that into a cervical spine assessment as well with an autonomic test, just to see how is the body responding to this. Because one of the things that we typically see in concussion care is just exercise intolerance. And mainly people can't really exercise and their heart rate get high without passing out or feeling woozy. And that's a common thing too. That happens. And one of the biggest things, and it's free, I just tell people, hey, walk until your heart rate gets to this certain amount and then stop. And then come back the next day and walk a little bit further until your heart rate. And so slowly over time, with no extra cost, they can slowly get better at exercise. And that's just going to help everything, because blood flow is moving and the brain is perceiving oxygen a little bit better, receiving oxygen. But also, always take a look at the eyes, and we have some great partners here in Lubbock to take care of vestibular rehab or oculomotor rehab, which would be really the eyes and the way that they tie into the brain, into the neck. And so I always look at that, and sometimes I'll recommend some strategies, whether it's just tracking the thumb or moving the head while keeping the eyes still. So I look at that as well, but for the most part, people are already doing that. And if it gets too extreme, I just recommend that they go see one of our partners in the area anyways. And so those are probably the biggest things that I run into, the balance centers of the ear, the eyes, and then exercise intolerance. And so for the most part, that stuff can be done really, really easy and really quickly. And I can pretty much find areas where people need some help. And if it gets to be too much, I'll just send them to one of our partners in the area.
Very cool. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, so with social media and everything, a lot of people think, it can just be one adjustment and you're cured, which is most often not the case. One adjustment can be very profound, but you got to make sure the adjustments are staying in place and holding. What do you like to educate your patients on through the healing process? One of the most pressing questions I get is, how long is this going to take to heal? And every case is different, but what do you like to tell your patients that are coming to see you for concussions? What's the healing process going to look like?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think one, it depends on how long ago the concussion took place. Based off of the research, the number one determining factor of how likely the symptoms are to persist and either go away is how quickly that person has come in to see some type of professional, regardless of if they're an upper cervical chiropractor or some type of neurologist or their primary care. So that's the number one determining factor. So if it's been several years since your concussion, you're still having these symptoms, gosh, I think it's important to communicate with clarity and trust that it might not go away overnight.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some situations, and I'm sure you've experienced it, where some people will be experiencing the same exact symptoms and probably the same exact situation, and one person will just get better overnight after that adjustment.
Yeah.
And then over time, they'll continue those results. But there's also those other people where you do that adjustment and nothing happens for a couple of weeks, and then you do another adjustment, and then it just slowly but surely gets better over time. So I tell people, for me, it took me a year and a half to fully recover and get back to who I was.
Me too.
And so, and so that gives them a little bit of framework. It lets them know that, hey, I'm not just doing this to take your money. I don't want to have to see you all that often, but we'll monitor this on a case by case basis and really a visit by visit basis. We have our particular template that we follow of recommended care for you, but there's also going to be some opportunity to tweak it, or if we need to, see a little bit more and see a little bit less, as much as we as we see that your body is changing and healing and adapting. But I tell people it's just patience. I think an open line of communication is key, and I want you to feel like you have the ability to share your concerns or share your thoughts and share where you might have some points of contention with me. Or with the care plan or where you are. And I think that really the biggest thing is they need to know that they have some ability to choose in their healthcare journey, and the ability to talk to their provider. And that's kind of what I try to communicate on our first several visits, is that, hey, I'm on your team and we're going to do this, and it's probably going to take some time, and patience is going to be key. And the cervical spine is complex, especially when there's some type of injury that you have been experiencing. So, man, it's a hard conversation because nobody really knows, and you can't even promise results. But based off of what I've seen, there's it usually takes time. Not everybody heals within the first month or 2 months or 3 months. It's usually a longer recovery period.
Yeah, my first adjustment was extremely profound, but the first 3 to 4 months under care was a roller coaster ride. Couple good days, couple days where some of my old symptoms would come back. 6 months in, I felt a lot better, but was still having some bad days. 9 months in, I felt really good, but that year and a half mark was when I was like, okay, I feel better than I did before the injury. And my spine, my ligaments feel strong again. And not to say that it was a year and a half of misery. There was amazing bright spots, and it got better and better each month, but it does take some time to heal.
Yeah. And doing the Diplomat program even showed me that, man, ligaments take forever to heal and stabilize. It's not like a week, and that's what we're really trying to do. Holding takes place at the area where the brain is controlling the joint a little bit better through the muscles. And through that healing process, there's less tension put on the ligaments. And then those ligaments can heal a little bit better, and there might be a little bit of scar tissue surrounding those areas. But for the most part, 12 to 24 months is pretty common for those ligaments to heal.
especially in that upper cervical spine area where it's a very
Yeah.
unstable area. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So, Al, at the end of all my shows, I like to ask all my guests, what is one piece of advice that has really resonated with you that you would like to gift the audience? Could be absolutely anything.
Oh man. Yeah. I think for me, the advice that I'm given is to just not give up hope.
Hmm.
You know, there's always something out there, even if you don't find the results that you want with upper cervical chiropractic care, that there's always hope out there.
Hmm.
And to continue to expect that there's something coming. And I love the your podcast. I've even got it, you know, the expect miracles on my cup here. But there's so much to be said about just having hope and continuing the journey of discovery. And you never know where that path is going to take. I remember my counselor asked me to kind of create some type of word picture in my mind whenever I was probably, this was probably 2 or 3 months after my concussion and panic attack and all that stuff. And I said to myself, I feel like I'm going up a mountain on a trail. Man, we don't have those over here in Lubbock. So if you're in Lubbock listening to this, imagine like a mountain, but it feels like I'm surrounded by fog. But all I can see is my footstep in front of me. I can see where my feet are. I have like a lamp. I can see where I am right now, but not anywhere else. But I know I'm going up this pathway, up this journey, up this mountain. And I don't know where it's going to lead me, but I know where I
Hmm.
am now.
Yeah.
And I know that there's something ahead of me that's good. And so that's the hope that, that's the advice that I always give people, is to continue to have hope and continue to expect that what's going on now is going to further you and you're going to be better for it in the long run.
Yeah.
The interesting thing for me is you are, what you're going through is going to be used to impact somebody else in your situation in the future. I guess it was about 6 weeks ago, a patient showed up in our office from a chiropractor here in town, and he just didn't see people on Fridays, and Fridays was the only time that would work for him. And so he showed up over here. Every single one of the symptoms that I had is something that he experienced. So he
Hmm.
was depersonalized, very anxious, very paranoid. For whatever reason, he was never a germaphobe and became a germaphobe. You know, some of those weird symptoms that, you know,
Hmm.
you don't really have an explanation for. And he had really bad neck pain as well that was just kind of aggravating these things. And I don't know if it was just having a brother in the journey with him that said, "Oh man, he experienced all these things, and I don't even have to explain it even more anymore
Hmm.
because he understands everything he said." It's like, "Yeah, dude, I know exactly what you're talking about."
Hmm.
And within 3 weeks, he texted us and said, "Hey, dude, I just want to let you guys know I'm like 90% better. I don't feel anxious. I feel like I'm back in my body, and I'm
Hmm.
forever grateful for you." And so if I wouldn't have taken the journey to take the experience that I had been given and push forward with hope, and then now I get to reproduce that in the lives of others, then that guy might still be suffering, you know? And so
Hmm.
that's kind of why I push forward the way that I do.
Yeah. And I think your story is amazing too, because you kind of let that higher power take, you kind of surrendered and let it take you where you needed to go. You weren't closed minded and you're like, I got to be a minister. I got to be a minister. Although that
Mm-hmm.
it's still a part of your life. It's not like you're not doing that now, but you
Mm-hmm.
kind of let go, you surrendered. And it's so amazing where all those twists and turns have led you today. And you're doing amazing
Mm-hmm.
work, Al. And it's been such an honor to have you on the podcast today.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I think the funny thing is I get to lay hands on people every day, probably more than I did before. So
Yeah.
I think it's great. Kevin, thanks so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. And I'm thankful for what you do and for the encouragement that you give people, not only here, but in your office and online.
Awesome. And Al, would love to have you back on anytime, brother.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure I'll see you in the next several months
I'll
at
be
one of the
seeing you in
conferences.
Texas in September. Yeah.
Heck yeah.